everybody. It's 6:30. We have a lot to cover, so I'm going to start as people trickle in. This is an informational meeting. The bylaws allow us to have an informational meeting every once in a while, and got 15 days notice and had a specific purpose, and that's what I'm going to cover now. Okay, there are two topics, as you should have known. One is the clubhouse renovation status, and the other is capital budgeting, that some people are concerned about also. So I'm going to go through these, and then at the end, we're going to take questions and comments, and there'll be a microphone over there. So if you can try and remember what you want, we'll do it that way. You know, you'd think a place like Ballin Isles would be pretty simple to build or renovate a clubhouse. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. We started, once the members took over the club from the builder, there was a plan in 2007 called the Facilities Improvement Plan, and it included the East Course, the sports complex, and clubhouse renovation. And the rationale for the clubhouse renovation should sound sort of familiar. It was for more card space, bigger kitchens, a better sports bar, etc. So there was a vote then, and the projected cost for the clubhouse was $13.7 million. It was going to be financed by the sale of homes and an assessment. Members could had to vote on each of the three elements, and the clubhouse was the one that got the most, all three passed, and the clubhouse got the most votes. But the board at the time decided instead to do the East Course and the sports complex, and the clubhouse was delayed. Then in 2009, the board at that time said, well, the building code has changed, and it posed to the members three alternatives. To go with the original plan, the 13.7, which would have to be modified somewhat before the new building, maybe not the new building code, we could still get permits under the old building code. To come up with a new clubhouse, which was a $20 million number, or to basically kill the project. And the members voted to kill the project on the clubhouse. Still went forward on the sports center and the East Course. But as part of killing the project, the club put in $3 million to renovate the lower level of the clubhouse. If you don't know, there is a lower level, about half of the clubhouse, and besides the golf cart storage, it includes shipping and receiving and food storage, a prep kitchen, and an employee cafeteria. So we spent about $3 million to do that, as also to buy some furniture for, I believe, the card rooms at the time. And then nothing much happened until 2014. And in 2014, we had what was called a strategic plan, where you were presented an option to finance a number of projects by giving up some of the equity that you had in the club. And at that time, the projected cost for a clubhouse was $17 million. All of these were not detailed designs, but they were hypothetical costs for what the board thought it might cost. So that was passed. In 2015, they went and undertook, we had focus groups, and some of you hopefully remember the focus groups we were in, and came up with a proposal to build a clubhouse for about $30 million. But there were not engineering drawings. The board at that time had consulted some construction firms, and these were their estimates as to what it would cost. And this was put to the members for a vote, and it was defeated, about 55% to 45%. Then in 2016, the board went to the members and said, look, If what you want are specific plans and a guaranteed maximum price, we need to spend some money to get architectural drawings and get bids to do that. So the membership authorized an expenditure of $2.5 million to get the architectural drawings and to get a builder who would commit to a guaranteed maximum price. And then, last February 2017, it was put to the members to build to that plan for $32.5 million on top of the 2.5. So this is the history to get here. It's not easy. A lot of work went into this. And I have to tell you, to get to that last step, we owe a debt of gratitude to a couple of individuals who put their heart and soul into this. There was Jack Cook, Joel Weinstein, and Steve Lipson. Now, okay, here's what was presented. We had a town hall meeting on February 13, 2017. And in that meeting, if you were there, you got a brochure like this that had the floor plans in it, and it had the seating capacity and the floor plans and various things like that. It didn't have any costs. However, at that meeting, there was a town hall that talked about the construction budget, and I'll go into what that included. But the construction budget included the architects and consultants, the builder, the guy who was actually going to put up the building, the permits, and the permits sound sort of, minor, but they cost $500,000 for Palm Beach Gardens to let us build this. The interior design firm that came up with the design, and I'm sure you'll all remember that episode last summer, and the furniture and fixtures. That's the furniture that they proposed, the fixtures that go in the building, and the kitchen equipment and all that. And it was to be all that for $32.5 million on top of the 2.5 that was already spent for the design. It was also at that town hall meeting, it was explained that we're going to finance this $35 million we had accumulated $10 million in the facilities improvement plan. Over the 10 years that nothing was built, we still had been selling houses. And the money that the club makes from transferring of memberships and the sale of memberships to people who to houses that hadn't been members of the club, we had about $10 million that was not committed. And then we were going to get a bank loan for $25 million for the construction. At that town hall meeting, we also talked to temporary facilities. And temporary facilities at the time was specifically listed as the pavilion that you're in now, the bistro tent, which you know is over by the bistro, and the golf shop trailer. There were no detailed costs given at the time for the temporary facilities. In actuality, we could have done the following and said, forget the pavilion, forget the bistro tent, play cards at home, eat on PGA Boulevard, and just hunker down and not spend that money. The board felt that's not really Ballin Isles. So we decided to go forward with this, and really this is what they did at Mirasol and Ibis also. They had facilities like this. They weren't as big in terms of the card playing, so we had the extra tents on the side for card playing, but we still had people playing at home. So, and it was said at the time in the town hall meeting that this was going to be paid for out of savings that had been accrued over the years in operational savings. From each year, we have a budget, we save a little budget. It turns out since 2011, the various boards, not only the current board, but previous boards, had underspent the budget by a total of $5 million. So that money was sitting there and it was thought to be used. And if you wanted to see further evidence of this, If you go to the Ballin Isles website and you look under Clubhouse renovation, you'll see a video where the entire town hall meeting is 2 hours and 20 minutes long. And it shows the furniture, blah, 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 all that. But at about 1 hour and 10 minutes into it, I'll save you the time. If you move ahead to 1 hour and 10 minutes, you can see Bob Naftali talk about the bank loan and talk about paying for the temporary facilities out of the accrued savings on the operational account. So that's there. This is the proxy. This is what you voted on. And there are a couple of interesting things. You voted on, the term project here is important. The term project is very specific. It's the construction project, okay? It's the thing that people wanted to, that worried about on the design that was defeated. Okay, so the construction project here is 32.5 on top of the 2.5 that was spent for the design. And then there was a second vote, which was for the bank loan. If the bylaws, if we borrow more than $4 million, you have to have a separate vote. And basically, this is what was voted on. And this is the chart that was in that presentation. And you'll notice it links very closely. It's 34.9. So, and you can see the elements here, the consulting fees, which includes the architect, and some small things, the permits of $500,000. We have some things that we're going to contract for that made no sense to go through the interior design or the builder, like televisions and things like that, and the furniture and equipment. So, and then we also had a contingency in there, so that we had, it's construction, and if anybody's ever built something, you have to know, have to have some contingency. But anyway, so the whole thing came up to just about $35 million, and that's what it included. And this is what the members voted on. They didn't vote on the temporary facilities. They didn't vote on some other things. This is what they voted on. And it passed. It passed 72% in favor of the project and a 69.6% in favor of the financing. So it was not a squeaker like they had at Mirasol. This was a clearly solid vote to go forward. But in addition to that, on 1 week after the town hall meeting, we had been sending out a series of FAQ, is frequently asked questions. And there was a frequently asked question sent out 1 week later, and it specifically said, what does the $35 million project cover? Okay, the 35 and project. And this is there, construction of the new space, clubhouse up to current standards. Because when we weren't destroying the clubhouse, we were bringing it up to standards, which are the hurricane standards and the current building standards in Palm Beach County. We're getting new and repurposed furniture. Some of the chairs we're refurnishing and reupholstering. Equipment for the kitchens, and expanding parking and landscaping. If you check your emails, you'll see an email on that date that has this. And it was those 5 items. What was not in, now the project, I'm using the project as the $35 million project. What was not in there were the temporary facilities. And besides those 3, it turned out there were some other, those are the 3 that were mentioned in the town hall meeting. There was one other. We had a trailer, which was a temporary restroom. We have storage. Think about all the furniture and the art and tables that we had in that building. They're in storage somewhere in Port St. Lucie. And so we have all that stuff stored, and a lot of it's being repurposed and refinished. And then we had some owner's rep fees that we paid for consulting to help us manage these facilities. Our accountants said this should be treated as an operating expense as opposed to a capital expense, as an accounting issue. And this is the same treatment they had at Ibis and Mirasol. They went through the same thing we did. So it turns out we have the same accountants. I think almost all the clubs here have the same accountant, so that's what it is. And basically, as Bob had said in the town hall meeting, we're paid for it by the savings in the budget over the years, and also not having a clubhouse. In a strange way, it cost us less a little by not having the clubhouse. We didn't have a lot of the contracts we had for the clubhouse, and it just is, we had certain economies, and we had a lot less staff than we had planned. How are we paying for it, this $35 million project? Well, we had, as I told you before, we had $10 million already in the bank. And it's a $25 million loan, payable over 12 years. And you see the video, 20 million is a fixed rate and 5 million is floating rate. And we're basically paying it through the home sales and membership upgrades, not through assessment. And the planning for it is saying if we sell 66 homes a year or 66 upgrades from a social to a tennis or a tennis to a full, it can pay for this. And last year, 2017, there were a total of 72. So far this year, in 2018, after a slow start, we have 39 in the first 4 months, which are very good. May looks strong also, so far. So we're sort of ahead of plan in terms of accumulating money to pay down the debt. What else is needed? Well, one other thing that came to mind was operating supplies and equipment. These are the dishes. We have a lot of dishes here, but not as many as we need for the dining room, the 19th hole, the grill room, the upscale dining. And so we obviously needed dishes. It made no sense at the time to have the builder buy them or the interior designer to buy them. It's the sort of thing we are certainly capable of buying, just like we're buying televisions. We thought we could, just go out and buy them as part of an operating expense. And the accountant said, no. This is a new start, and you have to do this as a capital expenditure. So they said, you can't break it up, it has to be capitalized. Once you have them, as you get breakage, and as you fill in over time, it's an operating expense. But as part of a new start, you had to do that. So what we did is we put it in the 2018 annual capital budget, which is the second half of this presentation, and for about $500,000. It's a placeholder right now. We haven't spent any money on it yet. We don't want to spend money because we have no place to put them, okay? So there's no reason to buy them and put them in storage. So it's the sort of thing you buy with a couple of months lead time, and that's all. So that's what is still needed. So now, where are we in construction? You look at it from here, it's hard to tell. The windows are up, okay? The roof is basically up. Putting up the roof tiles is inconsequential. It's not on the critical path, and they do it as time permits. But we had a construction budget of $35 million, and we've incurred $19 million so far. We asked Ryan and I asked the builder the other day and said, what percentage done are you? I don't know what this means, okay? So don't ask me to explain it. He said 67.79%, okay? I don't know what that means, but that's his number, and he's responsible for doing that. And we still have, as part of the contingency, $1.4 million. We started with $2.5 million on the contingency. We're down to $1.4 million. I'll show you a little more. Before I do that, there's I think some slides got missing. The construction, there's somehow people think there's a $3 million overrun on this project. I heard rumors, so we sent out a notice a week or two ago and say, what is this $3 million that people talk about? And the one thing that's, you got to remember, the construction project we're focusing on is building that, okay? It's not this, okay? This was always separate. In our mind, it's paid for separately, it's paid for out of savings, but, and the cost of this tent is, on a monthly basis, a little more than $100,000 a month. It's not cheap. And when you take all the temporary costs together, from the beginning when we left the clubhouse in May of 2017, till we're in there, which will probably be November of 2018, it could come up to $2 million. We also had a write-off. In 2015, there was a failed vote on the construction of the clubhouse I mentioned before. We had spent, the club had spent, $500,000 pursuing that vote. We had paid consultant fees, all sorts of things. Every time you have a presentation like this, or a presentation where you print brochures or something like that, it somehow always comes to $50,000, okay? So every time you have a vote, it's $10,000, and it sort of adds up. So we had about $500,000 that was in that project, and it was sitting on the books. And it should have been written off in 2016, but we wrote it off last year. The accountant said, this is money that's already spent. The money's out the door, but it was sitting as an expense on the books, so we wrote that off. And then we still have the dishware, the china and all that, and that's the $500,000. Is this the $3 million that people are worried about? I don't know, it adds the $3 million, but I don't know what people are worried about. But anyway, there's a write-off, the $2 million, and then the dishes. This is budget details. You can't read this. There's going to be a handout when you leave so that you can see these next two slides if you want. But what it has is the various things that we pay for. So there's a big number here, about $25 million, which is the builder, but it's got the architect's fees, the interior design fees, the audio-visual fees, which we pay these things separately because it was more efficient to do this instead of flowing. Everything you have the builder do, he puts a 10% and a 10% on. So if the things you can do yourself, we do ourselves. And this is an entire listing of when you see Chapman Coyle, that's the architect. You have a series of those. And there's the urban design. We got the permits with the land planning. And there, Jay Banks is our interior designer. You could, if you're interested, you'll pick this up on the way out. It's a long list, so you can see it goes down. And then when you get down to here, bottom, these are change orders. As we went into building, even though we had architectural drawings and all that, when you actually build something, you find, it didn't look quite right, things didn't quite match. The left hand didn't talk to the right, didn't know what the right hand was doing, so we had a series of these change orders. We had a problem, and it is here in Hurricane Irma, about $30,000, even though it didn't, destroy the building or affect us. We did have some flooding in there, and we also they had to prepare the building for the hurricane, and the workers disappeared on them because they had to take care of their own families, and things like that happened. We also had a series of issues with Seacoast in terms of the sewage and the like in the building. There were some things when we went into the building yet you could not know ahead of time because they were underground or they were hidden in the roof. So some of those things, some turned out well, like the roof was in very good shape, but then some of the sewage was not in good shape and not to code. So we had some expenses from that. So anyway, this is the, you'll get a list of this and you can go through. It's not clear that you'll be able to understand anything, but you'll see the various puts and this is what we use to manage the project. So this is updated on a monthly basis.
What's the bottom line?
What? The bottom line? Well, the bottom line is just it's just the cost. It says $35 million. You can't, at the bottom it says 30, all this stuff adds up to $35 million. Adds to $35 million, okay? So that's what, just can't see it. And so this is $35 million, and this is $19 million. That's what we've spent so far. So the previous slide had the summary of what this was. Now, well, I'm going to go through sort of quickly some of the pictures. Now, and they're going to do it, you might find that this is the layout of the building, okay? This hasn't changed from February of 2017. As a matter of fact, it hasn't changed since 2016. This is virtually the design that was defeated by the members back then. And it's got, the main dining room is on the right. And sort of as you look at it there, this is the entry, there's a lobby lounge, grill room, sports bar, pro shop, and card rooms. This is the porte cochere. This is largely intact from what we had before. This is the lobby. It looks a little narrower than it feels, and that in back is the lobby lounge. And this will be the back of the lobby, and it'll look out over the golf course. A spectacular view. Harry's Bar, looking from Harry's Bar out towards the lobby lounge. This is from the outside the lobby lounge, and it'll look out towards the main dining room. Has, you can see that it's being painted. So the builder is working from east to west, from right to left, and you can see they're fairly far along on that side of the room. And you can see the ceiling and the paint. You'll see a number of workmen in these slides. At any particular day, there are 80 to 120 people working in that building. From the outside, it doesn't look that busy, but it is very busy on the inside. This is the dining room looking towards the entry. There's a fixed buffet. So in the dining room, there's going to be some fixed space that'll be used for a buffet. And then we will have movable buffets that augment that when we're having a buffet lunch, say. But then this is the dance floor. Dance floor will be tile, not wood. Then on the back, there'll be cloistered areas. These are covered areas. Right, if you think back to the way the clubhouse was, there was really nothing that was in the shade or covered. So you'll have one on the east and west. This is on the west behind the dining room. And this is the ladies' card rooms. And in case you notice or ask a question, the windows here are rectangular as opposed to the rest of the house, because the card players want to have shades so nobody can peek at their cards. And anyway, this is, you know, the drywall is largely up on the left side of the building. There are restrooms. If you remember the golf circle, where the various associations would collect before going out, there are now restrooms there, so you don't have to run up to the clubhouse. This is the west entrance, where this is next to the bag drop. The downstairs will have offices, and upstairs you have card rooms. There'll be expanded car parking behind, and I think the pavers are going in now. That's why everybody's being rerouted in the golf carts as you go around to the north course. This is the grill room, which is similar to the grill room that we had, except it's going to have this pizza-like oven, and it'll have a display for having a permanent display for having buffets in there. We call this the history hall. Maybe name this will go down to the pro shop. This is by the card rooms. The golf shop, which will have 2 dressing rooms. This is the outside of the golf shop. We'll have a terrace, and it'll have a covering to that, so you can sit out there, son. This is the other cloistered area in back. And the, again, okay, that's item number 1, okay, on the clubhouse. So if you can remember your questions to that, okay, there's a lot in there, but basically what it says, I'll summarize, is we focused on the construction project because that was what people complained about in 2015. They wanted to have a guaranteed maximum price for building the building. On top of that, we had the temporary facilities, which is this. It was a choice, but potentially a choice, but really no choice. Otherwise, you know, everybody would be up in arms in doing that. And that's the sum of that. It's going to happen. The thing is, it's going to happen. Target date is to serve food in November in the dining room. There'll be a phased approach as to can't open all the venues at the same time, but it's, you know, it's going to happen, and it'll be spectacular. Okay, item number 2 is capital budgeting and usage. Okay, our bylaws. Our bylaws are like the Constitution, okay, the government Constitution. It tells us, board and members, both of us, what we must do, what we can do, and what we can't. If you haven't read it, at some point, keep it next to your bed. If you get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're guaranteed to be asleep by 3:10. It also has some other interesting things. It says, we're not like the federal government. It says, when it's silent or ambiguous, the board can decide. And that's in the bylaws. But historically, when boards are in doubt, they've gone to outside counsel and say, can we do this, or what should we do that? A lot of times the outside counsel says, well, you could do this, you could do that, do what you want. And as long as we're not arbitrary and capricious, the board, arbitrary or capricious, and have the good, the interests of the members at heart, we can, the board can, and does do that. These things, I mean, they were sort of carved in stone, but not very deeply, since they've been amended 8 times in 10 years. And we were, last time we had or 2 times ago, we had a meeting here, we were looking at the next change to the bylaws. And if you remember that meeting, the hot issue there was the emeritus membership. Okay, that was, everybody was confused about and didn't know whether they liked or not. But these are the bylaws, and we were planning to have a vote on the bylaws as they were drafted. The board had worked on them for about a year, and there was wordsmithing as well as some substantive issues, but that was what we're going to do. But one of the things that the bylaws talk to, say, the annual dues. It says, when you have annual dues, when the members get charged, really has 2 components. It's got an operating component, and it's got a capital component. And the capital component is for those things you're going to invest in that have multiple years of use, and typically. And the operating is the stuff that, you know, you use on a daily basis and helps pay for all the subsidized food you get. But that's what's there. And then it says, when you do this, and this is all defined in the bylaws, that you have an annual capital budget and a capital reserve fund. I abbreviate these because they're going to come up a lot. The annual capital budget lists the items that are going to be acquired in the current year. Like in 2018, we have an annual capital budget. What is prepared in the October, November timeframe before the year, and we use that to come up with the dues. And then there's the operating budget, which is come up with the dues. And if you check your statement each month that you pay, there are 2 lines. There's operating dues and capital dues. You may not look at it, but they're always there. And then you have the capital reserve fund, which is a pool of capital that is not earmarked for specific expenditures in the current year. This is all defined in the bylaws. Oh. I went back to 2017 for a reason. In 2017, the annual capital budget was $1.6 million, but we only spent $1.1 million. There was some changes in a couple of areas, but the big thing was the port co-share. The port co-share for the sports complex, which very much like the clubhouse renovation has been a hot potato since that building has been built. And we really, the members have been promised and not promised something there. And what we tried to do in early 2017 was to get it built when we were closing the clubhouse. And this was going to be the only dining venue during the summer when it's the rainy season here. And we tried to get it built, and we had money identified in the budget. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough time to do it because they had problems with the fire marshal. They wanted more space to be able to go drive their fire trucks around, and the renovations would have taken too long from the time we would not be ready by the time we closed the clubhouse. So it was never built. So now I come to the 2018 plan, which was developed in October, November. First of all, it was an unusual year. We got a lot of money from the insurance for Hurricane Irma. It was just a lot of money we didn't expect. I think it was $1.5 million, $1.7 million. What we saw this as an opportunity to say, we can take care of a bunch of things that the members wanted over the years. So we built an annual capital budget of $3.8 million, $1.6 million out of the capital dues, $1 million out of the reserves, and $1.2 million out of the insurance proceeds. And this is what we do. When we do the annual capital budget, we get the input from the various departments, the golf department, the tennis, agronomy, house, and the like, and they rank their things that they want to buy in the coming year. And then we had 4 major items on top of that, big dollar items. There was the port co-share, which we intended to do the year before. There was repair of the East Coast bunkers, not re-engineering. There's still going to be deep bunkers, but allow them to be maintained better and they would perform better. The china for the clubhouse, which I mentioned in the earlier slide, and the South Course pump house had to be replaced. So these were big items, but this plus all the other small items came to 3.8. Then we had some people raised issues. More than people, 3 ex-presidents raised issues. So what were their issues they raised? They said if you read the bylaws, they believe that the annual capital budget is capped at 8% of the operating budget. The operating budget is around $33 million. So this would mean an annual capital budget of 2.6, not 3.8. There was a question of how do we use the insurance monies. The bylaws are silent on it. There's no mention of extraordinary income. Like, for example, if we were to sell the fourplex to BICA, which we're not doing, but if we were to do that, what would we do with the money? The bylaws don't say what you do with the money. It says, the question is, can you use the capital reserve to fund the annual capital budget? Doesn't talk to that. In the past, the annual capital budget has been typically funded only by capital dues. Well, because you didn't have extraordinary income, so it wasn't an issue. The question is, why are we doing it now? And the question is, why wasn't the annual capital budget discussed in the board minutes? So these were some issues that were raised, and so we had a meeting. These ex-presidents asked for a meeting with the board, We met with them, we asked them to put down their issues in writing, and they did. Okay, first thing we did, we had to say, since they've raised, we're going to have a semi-freeze on capital spending. So we're not going to spend anything except what we have to do until we have resolution of this issue. That's the only responsible thing to do. And then we decided to get a fresh legal opinion as to, what we could do, what we should do. And the question is, from whom? So we formed an ad hoc committee of 2 new directors. It turned out the 2 new directors on the board are both attorneys, and neither of them was involved in the development of this budget. So hopefully they could look at this, without bias. And we had 1 non-director, somebody who lives in the community. Maybe you know Phil Proger, who was a senior partner at Jones Day. And the 3 of them, Phil identified 3 law firms, and the 3 of them met with the law firms. They did not shop for an opinion. They met with the law firms and never told the firms what the issues were that we were looking at. And we selected a firm of Cherry Edgar & Smith, who happened to also be the counsel for Mirasol, Frenchman's Reserve, and IBIS. I have an asterisk on IBIS, and that they were the counsel for IBIS until one of them moved into IBIS, and they could no longer be the counsel for them. So these lawyers know the sorts of things that we deal with. May not know our particular membership, but that's what they did. Oh. Okay, the first piece they said, you got to redraft the bylaws. Okay, that was their key #1 advice. The bylaws are full of ambiguity. They don't talk to the things that we hadn't thought about, like extraordinary income, and it's important to have consistency for future boards. Part of the issue is, if you go through history, various boards made various decisions, and they really were not. There's no codification. There's no no history of how decisions were made. So basically, they said clean up the bylaws. First thing is, but until you do that. Okay, they gave us interpretations. #1, the annual capital budget is capped at 8% of the operating budget. So instead of a 3.8, now we had a $2.6 million annual capital budget. And this year it's that. Next year, if the operating budget is different, it'll be capped at 8%. You don't have to fund it to 8%, but that you cannot fund it higher than 8%. It's not limited to the capital dues. Each month you pay operating dues and capital dues. You can now augment your capital dues from the capital reserve. You cannot increase the annual capital budget, the total, during a fiscal year. So if you had suppose we had an annual capital budget of $2 million, and you couldn't decide mid-year to make it 2.6 or 2.4. So you could always decrease it or not spend, but you can't increase it above what you set it at the beginning of the year. But you can swap projects. You can move projects in and out. Sometimes you got to realize the annual capital budget is done October, November for the coming year. And sometimes you don't, some things just don't happen, just like the Port Cocher in 2017. It said you can use the insurance monies, like we got for Irma, basically for the operations or assets that were impaired. We had a lot of the Irma money came for the golf course, trees to the golf course and the like, and also repairs to the golf. You can use it for that, and anything more you can then put into the annual capital, into the capital reserve fund. The capital reserve fund can be used for unbudgeted projects up to $250,000 without a vote of members, and above $250,000 requires a vote of members. It's very similar, I think, to what the Community Association. And it can use the capital dues to repay debt on a capital project. So what did we do? So we said, okay, we got to live with this now. So we're going to have the annual capital budget capped at 8% of operating budget of 2.6. We already had set the capital dues, which is what we set the dues in October, November last year, and and it's in there for $1.6 million, and we're using $1 million out of the capital reserve. We're going to take the insurance proceeds to reimburse the operations or replace trees, and the balance is going to go into the capital reserve, this pool to do future things. And then if you go back to an earlier slide, it said the annual capital budget was not mentioned in the minutes of the board. I went back to the minutes of the board, and from 2010 on forward, they were mentioned only twice. So now, there's nothing in the bylaws that says you should do it, but it's only fair that the board identify the operating budget and the capital budget in its dues, and basically in the past, it was never done. So that has nothing to do with the bylaws, that's just a proper management approach to put out the budget. So we're going to discuss it, and our next board meeting is May, in about a week, and the minutes will discuss the annual capital budget. What came out of the budget? Well, the East Coast bunkers, that was about a $700,000 item, not going to get done this year. Not going to get done out of the capital budget. We could still bring it to the members as part of, out of the capital reserve, and have the members vote on it. That's still possible. But this is what came out of the budget. We had the sports complex, the air conditioners. The sports complex has a very strange air conditioning system. We have a load of air conditioners on the roof as opposed to a central air conditioner, and some are starting to fail. And we had planned to have a preventive maintenance and replace some of those. We're not going to do that right now. We'll defer that. We had the men's restrooms and the bulkheads on the golf course. A small item, but for those of you who are golfers, the women's restrooms are much nicer than the men's restrooms, and this was to take care of that. That's not going to happen. And then the South Coast pump station. There's an asterisk there. If you remember, that was in the budget at $350,000. It was actually bought and installed for $200,000. So the savings, that's already done, because that happened at the beginning of the year, before the semi-freeze. So that's already done. So there's a $150,000 reduction from what the budget had. This is, when you put together the budget, you don't have hard contracts and haven't negotiated things. So sometimes you have a placekeeper. What's in? All the other stuff that we had from the departments. Everything from the tennis to the house, some sort of walk-in freezer that's been a perpetual item downstairs that replaces something. The agronomy, the mowers and carryalls and all that stuff is in there. The port co-share is still in there. We still feel it's important. Whether we can get it done this year depends on how soon that building is habitable, because we can't, the port co-share would close off the entrance to the sports complex. So that's a matter of timing. If that comes in a good time, we could still do the port co-share. And then we still have the pots and pans and the Chinaware that we talked about before. That's it. So we have, we take some questions. Peter's already got grabbed the microphone, so you'll have to wait until Peter. Excuse me? I will, if it's not loud enough, I will do it.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Peter Scheid. I'm one of the members who wrote to the board seeking a full disclosure of all of the costs to be incurred for the clubhouse renovation. So thank you for this particular meeting. I pose two related and key issues tonight. First, a complete estimated cost for the clubhouse renovation, including everything, should have been clearly disclosed at the time the clubhouse renovation was presented to members for approval in early 2017. Second, the controversy we have before us tonight raises significant concerns about the governance practices this board followed. In January of 2017, the board approved the clubhouse renovation. A ballot, called the limited proxy as you described, which is a controlling legal document, was sent to all members with a cover letter from the board president describing the renovation. That cover letter stated, the cost for the overall renovation project will be no more than $35 million, which includes the $2.5 million, etc. Dictionary defines overall as including everything. Accordingly, members had every reason to accept the board's assertion that the $35 million number included everything. At no time, importantly, did the board present a clear list, itemized, showing those additional costs. That's what a lot of this controversy has been about, starting with the annual meeting that occurred several weeks ago. Recently, the president sent out a letter saying this board and previous ones never, ever said that the entire cost associated with the new clubhouse was $35 million. The statement is simply wrong, as you can see from the above-cited cover letter. Recent attempts to wordsmith an explanation based on accounting distinctions that try to put the blame more or less on members for not understanding that all other costs were to be incurred are just disingenuous in my view. It's little wonder that lots of folks are upset at this. The question is how much money will be spent, et cetera, et cetera. I'll skip that because you described it. One thing is abundantly clear. If you had had this meeting in early 2017 describing the overall cost of the project, we wouldn't be here tonight. Present a total project cost estimate to the members, and I think, because it's a capital item, you need to get our approval for that increase. A waste of time, you might ask? I think you have a fiduciary responsibility to do that. You know, Westlaw describes fiduciary as an individual in whom another has placed the utmost trust and confidence to manage and protect property or money. And I think that's important. At the conclusion of the renovation, we should get a full and final cost report verified by our outside accounting firm. I'll be through very quickly. What's the underlying problem here? Why are we here tonight, and why did the controversy start at the annual meeting several weeks ago? And why did the three presidents, among others, bring the issues forward that they did? In my judgment, the key problem is that our board is stuck in governance practices that were discarded some 20 years ago following the Enron and WorldCom blow-ups. Corporate and nonprofit governance practices changed dramatically after those fiascos. The byword for boards and management became disclose, disclose, disclose. Do not hide anything, and be sure that stakeholders, members in our case, are at all times fully informed. This board really does not follow that concept. Tonight is an example of starting that, however. I make that judgment based on my many years as an officer and corporate secretary for publicly held companies, and I've been a director and still am a director of multi-billion-dollar organizations where we spent hours each year, just each calendar year, talking about compliance issues and responsibilities of directors. The point here is that the governance concepts and practices of this board must change, and change considerably, particularly as it relates to disclosure. The recent challenges the board expressed by previous directors, other members, is a perfect demonstration that there are real governance problems here and they need to be fixed. You've lost the trust of members, in my view, and it's up to you to adopt current best governance practices to regain that trust. I think the problems here are of your making, and only you have the ability to fix them. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. We did not hide anything from the members. The members voted for the construction and the various pieces. I showed you the proxy. I showed you the chart that the proxy talked to. The town hall, which is referred to in the proxy, identified the temporary costs, the temporary facilities. They were not costed. You're right, at the end of this, we can total it all up and say, this is what it cost. Some came from capital, some came from operating. But that's not your issue, okay? At the end, we can total it all up. You've seen tonight the principal components. There's the construction of that building and the stuff that goes into the building, from the furniture to the equipment and the services necessary to get that built. And I identified the temporary costs and also the china. Are there going to be others? Maybe, maybe not, hopefully not. But those are the major items. We can certainly add it up. Could it have been done differently? Maybe, but it wasn't. I can only tell you that this is what, and there have been various meetings. There's been bagels with the boards, letters from the president, videos as to what's going on, and I don't think anything on that has been hidden from the members. Could it have been done differently? Maybe, but you have to remember the focus and that the members wanted was a guaranteed maximum price to build that. And that was the focus of the vote, and that was the focus of the town hall meeting.
Hi, I'm Marvin Samber. I'm a sports member. I'd like to get to the bottom line. Based upon all of the analysis, you had promised us at the beginning that our dues would probably go up about $80. There would be no assessment. Based upon the data you're showing us, is that still the case?
Well, the only thing I can tell you, there are really two items. One is there is the term assessment has never been discussed regarding the clubhouse. Now, maybe for a different project, but not for the clubhouse. Okay, that's the first thing. When that building was starting to be planned, and this was announced to members, that the increase in dues from operating that would be $85 a month. Now, that was a projection. It depends upon a lot of things. How many people eat in the various venues, how the venues will be priced, what are we going to charge at happy hour, a lot of things that are still going on. But at the time, it was projected to be $85 a month for membership because of the clubhouse. Now, this doesn't include inflation or the like, but that was the analysis done, and there's no change to that at this time.
So you're still of the belief that it will be approximately $85?
Wait, let me tell you, Marvin, it hasn't. If you agree to eat 5 meals a day, we'll keep it $85 a month. A lot of it depends upon how the venues get used. It's a complicated business there, but there's no change to that. If it's 90, if it's 95,
And the extra costs for the pavilion and the tent, you all have that covered?
That's gone.
That's already...
Two things. The restrooms that were by the north course, they're gone. This tent comes down the end of May, I think it's June 4th. This comes down. The cost for this comes down. The bistro tent, we're keeping up until that building is open, because we need the space over there in the bistro tent. That was something, so we'll have that up for about a year and a half. And those are pretty much, at the time, the facilities for the temporary costs. This was a big item. It turned out while the rent for this is $100,000 or slightly more, the initial installation turned out to be more complicated because of the plumbing and also the electrical. This, you got to remember, this was installed right after Irma. And Florida Power and Light said they were not doing any new installations. So while this tent was projected to be up the beginning of November, we managed to get it up for Thanksgiving. It's construction, Marvin. So,
Michael, I just want to add what Peter had said. This was a very important meeting. Transparency is something that the board should understand that we need more of, and hopefully that will be occurring, and glad you had it.
we're trying to do that.
Wow, there's a lot of people in here. Good evening, Michael. How are you?
Hi.
Chuck
Hi.
McCarthy.
Good, Chuck.
How you doing? Listen, I'd like to echo what both Peter and Martin said. This is one of the first meetings I've been to at Ballin Isle since 2003 that the information that was presented was about as thorough as you can get, you know, in terms of how the project looks, what the spending is, et cetera, et cetera. So I appreciate that. I can't tell you how tired I am of doing forensic accounting. I hate accounting, you know. So, but I'd like to change subjects if you don't mind, or at least expand on a couple of things, if I could have 2 questions. At some point in time, as we went along, Michael, there were several conversations about bank debt, bank loan, and our ability to borrow. And if you remember, there was several statements that said we have $42 million worth of borrowing, whereby we're going to contribute $10 million in cash, have $25 million in bank borrowings with $7 million additional.
No. I think your numbers are wrong. The only thing on the clubhouse,
Right.
was the $25 million to finance the construction of the clubhouse. I'm not talking about the strategic plan that was done in 2014.
Right. My question was, at one point in time, several points in time, we were told that there was the ability to borrow additional amount of money to fund other projects, whatever they are.
Okay.
Here's my question. Did something happen with the bank that they changed their mind that we didn't have that credit line or that available borrowing?
No. The answer is the bank has said they would be willing to loan us additional, like for the South course, if that's what you're asking for. The question comes up, is it prudent on our part to do that? And how much do we want to borrow? And as it's that and interest rates. So we have, the fact that you can borrow doesn't mean you should borrow. Chuck?
I completely agree with you. I'm just asking the question.
The bank is, we are in discussion with them. Well, they're our bank. They're the bank on the construction for the East Course and the sports complex, which we're still paying off. And they're our bank to pay off for that building. And we're in discussion with them regarding the South Course. We're not there yet.
Okay, so the answer is that they haven't shut us off of that possibility. Great.
No.
I mean, that was my question.
They haven't shut us off.
The second, can I have another question?
Yeah.
Okay,
sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that, by the way. The second question I had was, I think that I heard, I'm not sure who it was, but there was a conversation about cash reserves, that as we spent whatever we were spending in capital spending, et cetera, we would start to get tight in capital.
I'm sorry, say that again? I don't understand your
I'm
question.
sorry, Mike. There was a comment made at some juncture that if we had spent the full amount of capital that was originally...
No, you misinterpreted. I didn't talk to that at all. The issue was, if we never fully expended, it turns out we got the insurance payment which paid for some of the things on the golf course, and the balance would go into the capital reserve. The only issue was if we had at the $3.8 million annual capital budget, it would have been more out of the capital reserve. But that's not the case. We have a $2.6 million annual capital budget.
Okay. So it would be, I appreciate that, Mike, I really do. It would be really helpful if you think it's appropriate at some juncture to provide maybe a 5 or 10 year cash flow when you guys get it. I don't know, whenever that's available.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Anything else?
I'd like to ask you a question.
Sure.
I appreciate all the financial discussions today, and we're going to have an absolutely magnificent clubhouse. But what concerns me is that these financial discussions will inhibit you in any way of finishing the clubhouse to the absolute highest standard that we expect.
The answer is that there's nothing that should limit the clubhouse. You may not like the decoration.
I'm not asking about that. I'm asking about that I don't want that to be cut short because we're making budget.
No.
Okay, that's all I wanted
the
to
budget,
know.
as I said, and very clearly, as the construction of that, which includes the furniture and the art, which is yet to be bought, is on budget and on schedule.
One other suggestion. Do not use the art consultant that you used in the ladies' card.
Okay. At art is, it's almost, that's more difficult than food, so.
Hi, I'm Jim Dragumas, golf member. Why did the board decide to charge golf memberships more for the clubhouse than the other categories?
No, we didn't charge more for the clubhouse. What we did is when you surrendered equity, the golfers surrendered more equity than, and part of that was to go, it was a previous board, but in notion was some of that was going to be used for the South Golf Course, okay, for which the golfers get a benefit and the non-golfers get an atmospheric benefit to the extent that it improves the value of their properties.
One, it was never explained to us that way. Two, it was never given to anybody that we are actually spending more dollars from golf memberships than we are from social, sport, or tennis, which is counter to how this club has been functioning in the past. When we did the East Course, the golfers paid for it, and the tennis players and sports and social members paid nothing.
But the North Course was almost that way, where some of the North Course was paid for by
sport.
By a little more than that. A little more than that. But it was paid for by the entire membership, part of the North Course. There was an assessment for the North Course for golfers, but there was some of it that was paid for out of the general.
Okay. Now, again, let's go back to it. Was the membership informed at the time that this equity deal was made that we, as golf members, would be paying more in dollars than the other categories?
That's what you were told.
Omission.
And part of it was because of the South Golf Course.
Were we told that?
Yeah.
When?
If you see the presentation.
I didn't see it in any of these.
I didn't talk, Jim, you have to go back to the 2014 strategic plan, which included a clubhouse for $17 million, which didn't work, a South Golf Course, and the sports complex.
So
that was what was presented.
Yep.
And
if that's the case, then why are we talking about an assessment for the South Course?
Because
we partially paid for it already.
Then you can do it without you can't borrow that much money.
But you're already accumulating it because you said you've taken part of this assessment, forgive the word, part of this reduction in equity as being funding for the South Course off the 2015 plan. Now you're saying, no, we're not going to use that.
This is not a South. The financing of the South Golf Course is not set. It is not part of this meeting, and you haven't been asked to vote on it.
So then, the money that you just stated coming out of this reduction in equity, out of the golf members, is not going to fund the South Course. You can't have it both ways. It's either funding part of it or it's not funding part of it.
It'll hopefully fund part of it.
Hopefully, and if it doesn't,
And
are all members going to get assessed?
Are you guaranteeing that the South Golf Course will pass?
I will guarantee that it won't pass, given what was going on here right now. But so you haven't answered the question the way it should be answered, which was, yes, money was taken out of golf memberships without golf members being informed that part of it was going to go to the South Course, and it's being funding the clubhouse, which then makes golf members paying more for the clubhouse than are the social, sport, and tennis. Thank you.
Okay.
My name is John Spinola. I'm a golf equity member. I'd like to know what the total indebtedness of the club will be with this $38 million.
Okay. Currently, we owe, I think it's $11 million on the East Course and the sports complex. And we pay that off at the rate of $2 million a year, $1 million every 6 months. And then on top of that, when we finish that, we'll have another $25 million. So you have to, by the time that's finished, we'll be at about a $35 million indebtedness.
But this $2 million a year that you're paying now is in addition to the, I think you said it was a 6-year note?
Oh, no, that's the original note.
note.
That's the original borrowing for the East Course and the sports complex. And that is being paid off at $2 million a year. It's about $11 million. The sports complex was a $26 million project. The East Course was a $9 million project, give or take. And part of that was paying off through sale of houses and an assessment. So you had both an assessment for the sports complex and the East Course by golfers and sports members, and through the sale of homes. And that is being paid off as we go forward.
So come November, combined, we'll have someplace around $49 million.
No. It'll be on the order of $35 million by the time that opens, because we will have paid off another $1 million on that. And this was based upon, we had a financing committee. If you take a look at the video of the town hall meeting in February 2013, you can see the committees that did the analysis and came up with a financing approach. There was 2 committees did that, and you'll see the names of the individuals on there. So that was the plan.
Okay, but you're using the same methodology to get the money for both. Turnover on houses?
A little different. For the sports complex and the East Course, there was also an assessment.
Okay. And what assessment did you guys calculate in your heads would probably be necessary to do it?
There's none.
None.
If we sell houses, if you sell houses at this rate, there is no assessment to pay this off. That's the plan. Jay.
Michael, I think if I understood you correctly, you said that there was a vote taken some number of years ago on 3 projects.
Right.
And that one of them was fixing up the South Course.
No, not the South Course. No, there's 2007. It was the East Course, the sports complex, and the clubhouse.
Has a vote ever been taken on whether or not the membership at large wants to put money into fixing up the South Course?
That will be this fall.
Pardon?
This fall.
Okay. Now, if there is no vote taken of the general membership, is it possible that the board of directors can take some of the extra money that they have and just dedicate that to fixing up the South Course?
No, it doesn't. If it would be more than $250,000, it would require a member vote.
Well, you mean that if the total amount was more?
No, if you have expenditure from the capital reserve for more than $250,000, it requires a member vote, a vote of the members. That's the bylaws.
Is there any way that you could think of that you could
Not a way that I'd save my skin.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
I know. Anything else?
Yeah, just a final comment.
Go ahead,
Listen
Peter.
to the annual meeting and the questions that you just got from members here. You need to figure out a way to disclose more of the financial plans of this organization than you have been in the past.
Okay. Thank you. Good night.